Our next speaker up today will be Paul Clark, and after him will be Elizabeth Melito and John Rodabaugh. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for the opportunity. I am professor and head of labor studies and employment relations at Penn State University. And I also have had experience in a non-academic setting, both as a union member and as a manager. As a university faculty member, I have observed, studied, and taught about the American system of employment relations for many years. And so my comments will take a broader focus, look at the broader picture in terms of the issues we're talking about here today. For the majority of American employees, the legal framework for the system of employment relations in the U.S. is spelled out in the National Labor Relations Act. Each time I introduce a new set of students to the Act, I begin by having them read Section 1. This section provides the rationale for the Act's passage. Central to that rationale is the concern that, quote, the inequality of bargaining power between employees who do not possess full freedom of association or actual liberty of contract and employers who are organized in the corporate or other forms of ownership association substantially burdens and affects the flow of commerce and tends to aggravate recurrent business depressions by depressing wage rates and the purchasing power of wage earners, unquote. It seems clear that in writing this legislation, Congress recognized that when employers held all of the power in the employer-employee relationship, when they made all the decisions unilaterally, not only did individual employees suffer, but so did society at large. The danger of concentrating power in any one institution is something that the architects of our political system clearly recognized, and it's the basis of the system of checks and balances that have been part of the foundations of American democracy. The architects of our system of employment relations recognize this danger as well. The opportunity to organize a union and bargain collectively that the National Labor Relations Act extended to American workers represents a check on the absolute power of employers in the workplace. And it serves as a mechanism for balancing the interests of employers and employees. Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid recently referred to the principle of checks and balances in a statement of support for the changes the board majority has proposed. Let me just state here that I believe I'm making a slightly different point than the speaker made. My point is that the right to organize and bargain collectively is itself a check on unilateral power in the workplace. If employees believe that an employer is exercising that power, the power they have responsibly by employing good human resource practices, providing reasonable pay and benefits, and using their right to employ at will judiciously, those employees will likely forego the right to organize a union. However, if the employer does not exercise its power in a responsible way, does not employ good HR practices, doesn't pay reasonable pay and benefits, or abuses its right to employ at will, its workers have a legally protected way to do something about it. They can organize a union and try to impact the employer's practices for the better. One of the aphorisms about employment relations that I first heard when I was a student and have heard many times since is that an employer who gets a union probably deserves one. We've all heard that. The idea being that employees, in almost every case, organize a union because, in their view, the employer has not lived up to its responsibility. I think that was actually, or is actually, a pretty insightful aphorism that applied for probably the first 40 years or so of the Act's existence. For much of that period, unionism grew to the point that up to a third of eligible workers exercised their right to organize and bargain. And for the 2/3 of employers without a union, the threat that their workers might follow suit provided a great incentive to provide good pay and benefits and otherwise engage in good HR practices. Regrettably, the thoughtful system of employment relations that the Act created and that served this nation well for several decades no longer functions as intended, and that's to the detriment of our employment relations system. In my opinion, this is because the check and balance the Act offered to employees, the opportunity to form a union and engage in collective bargaining, is now unattainable for many American workers. It is sometimes unattainable because the process for exercising that right has become a minefield and a marathon. And many employees who might want to organize a union simply choose not to because the price is too high. This assertion is backed by research conducted by Rogers and Friedman that indicates that 50% of the American workforce would like to be represented but will not attempt to organize. The minefield they face consists of the many sophisticated elements of the modern anti-union campaign, skillfully designed by attorneys, psychologists, and communication specialists. And the marathon aspect of the process, of course, is caused by the endless delays that have become part and parcel of the process, a phenomenon identified in a number of studies, including a recent one at the University of California. The fact that the employment relations system created by the Act does not function as intended serves the interest of employers, but it does not serve the interests of employees or of our larger society. I believe the changes proposed by the board majority are a small but important first step to restoring the opportunity for employees to choose union representation and collective bargaining. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Clark. Colleagues have any questions? Thank you for joining us here today and providing your perspective.